Today, I'm going to give you 5 critical tips for when it comes to doing your interview for PT school. If you're getting ready for this interview, make sure to watch this video because there's some really important information we're going to go over. Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. If we haven't met before, my name is Jim and I'm a physical therapist who is extremely passionate about what it is that I do, but I'm also extremely passionate about helping other individuals become physical therapists, regardless of whatever stage of their journey that they're at. I'm also really passionate about helping the general public understand what it is that we as physical therapists do and ways that I can help those individuals through this channel. So if that sounds like you in any way, shape, or form, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more great content. All right, so let's get right to it. Today when we're talking about these tips that you need to be aware of for going into PT school interviews, there's more than just these tips, but these tips are extremely important to keep in mind. They kind of serve as a foundation for which you can build other tips upon. And we need to start out just by talking about why these tips are really important. So let's do that first. So these tips are really important because when it comes to your interview for PT school, you need to understand what it is that these schools are looking for. If you don't know what they're looking for in these interviews, it's a little bit harder, if not a lot harder, to really stand out and just kind of crush this interview right from the start. Now, when we're talking about what schools are looking for, they're all looking for, again, students who can succeed in the program and do well, and the schools want to know that they've selected the right candidates for this because the schools are very interested in making sure that their students can graduate and pass the board exams because that's all stuff that they have to report every year. And when they report high graduation rates, high passing rates first attempt for board exams and everything else, that makes them look really good. So you need to be aware of that heading into the interview because when you understand what they're looking for, you can understand how to fine-tune all your answers to kind of dance around that general theme of what it is that they're looking for. As the old saying goes, you can't win a game if you don't know how to play. Now it's also worth mentioning that schools do interviews in different ways, and some schools don't even do interviews. So if you get into a school that doesn't do an interview, you don't even have to worry about anything that we're talking about here. But if you are going into a school that's requiring an interview and you do get an interview, understand there can be different ways that these interviews happen. It might be going to the campus and doing one-on-one interviews. It might be doing a phone interview if you live far away, or it might even be doing these kind of big group interviews. But all the tips that we're talking about here still stand regardless of what the interview is going to be like. All right, so tip number 1, you got to learn everything you can about this school before you go into the interview. Schools are interesting because they're kind of like siblings where they're very similar in a lot of ways, but also every school is a little bit different in other unique ways. They're all looking for the same things, right? They want the best students possible. They want to have a great reputation, all those kind of standard things that you would think about. But where they can differ is, again, kind of how they want to achieve these things. And when you're aware of those things, you can start to sprinkle in and fine-tune, calibrate all your answers around those themes that make them unique from other schools. So when it comes to learning all about these schools, what you want to do is go on their website, talk to other individuals, either in person or online, who have gone to that school. Learn all these unique things about what the school prides itself on, and you can again start to really kind of adapt your responses of what they're looking for into your answers when you're answering questions. So think about it this way. They say, hey, why is it that you've chosen our school? Why do you want to come here? Rather than just giving them a generic answer, I want to be a physio, all that type of stuff, that's great. But if you can fine tune it around, hey, I understand that your school is really involved with this. I understand your school really prides itself on that. And those align with my personal values and my beliefs. And that's really important to me. What you're doing is, again, you're kind of sprinkling in these kind of, extra little subtle ways of letting them know, hey, I've got attention to detail. I mean business. I'm really serious about this. And you're not doing it in a way where it's really upfront and you're bragging and you're trying to kind of really make them take notice, but just in these very casual ways where they're going to pick up, even in the back of their mind, and go, wow, this person really kind of knows what they're after. Let's maybe start to take them a little bit more seriously in the interview. So that can be a great starting point for when it comes to preparing for this interview that you're about to go on for your school. Now, it should also go without saying that that's for one school, but if you're going to another school interview, you repeat that process the exact same way. Again, don't really kind of rub it in their face how much you've learned about them or how much work you've put in to kind of fine-tuning your answers to fit around what they're looking for. The key is all in the delivery, right? Subtle, straightforward, but in ways that they're going to know that you have done your research. All right, tip number 2, be prepared for the interview questions that they're likely going to ask you. Now, before you start to ask yourself, well, what questions are they going to ask me? I've got a great resource that I can give to you. It's totally free. It's just a little piece of paper with all sorts of standard interview questions that you're likely to hear. And I'll put the link to it. It's on my website right here. Go there, you can download it for free. And that's going to be a great starting point for, again, understanding which types of questions they might want to ask you. Now, aside from using that free little cheat sheet that you can get off my website, the other thing that you can do is you can ask around on forums or even go online and start to ask about what other questions you might be expected to have to answer. A lot of schools are going to do it the same. They're going to ask you, why do you want to be a PT, right? What makes you different from other candidates that we're interviewing? So understand that there's all these questions that they're going to ask you, but it's not about trying to know answers for each and every individual question. What you want to do instead is just understand kind of the themes of what these questions are after. The themes around these questions are things like, why are you going to succeed in our program? Why are you someone who is going to be a good PT? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? Look for the themes in all these different questions, because if you can answer the themes, you can answer any question. Now, in addition to that, another great thing that you can do when it comes to practicing for interview questions is to actually get a friend or a family member and have them read off these questions to you, whether they're questions from the sheet that I'm providing for you or from anywhere else that you've got. When you can practice and kind of rehearse these verbally and not just up here in your head, it can really, really help you out for when it comes to answering the question on the actual interview day. And of course, it's always really important to remember that when it comes time to actually answer your questions, both when you're practicing and in the actual interview itself, take some time. It's okay to pause after they ask you a question. Reflect real quick. You don't want to take too long, but just say, just take a second. It's okay. 1 or 2 seconds, 3 seconds, not a big deal. In an interview, it might seem like an hour, but it's not. It's only a few seconds, and just taking a second to prepare yourself for the right answer can make a big, big difference. All right, we're moving on to tip number 3. Tip number 3, you have got to dress up. You have got to look the part. There are no exceptions to this. Doesn't matter who you are dressing up. You need to show them that not only do you mean business, but that you have attention to detail. So whether you're a guy, whether you're a girl, you're dressing up in business attire as if you would for an actual job interview that was really, really important for you. If you're a guy, you're dressing up suit, tie, no exceptions. Girls, same thing, blouse, trousers, all that for whatever is going to work best for you, but you are dressing up. When you're dressing up, again, not only does it show that you mean business, but it also just helps you to feel psychologically confident. You're thinking, okay, I'm in a suit, I'm in a tie, I'm looking good, I'm feeling sharp. That's a good psychological boost that you just want to take and run with when you go into these interviews. Now, if you're a guy, I'll put a link in the description below. If you're not quite sure how to dress up, there's a great website that can really help you out with these types of things. artofmanliness.com. I'll put some links in the description box below. They'll really be able to help you out in terms of knowing what it is that you should be wearing to this type of event. All right, we're moving on to tip number 4. Tip number 4 is all about knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Don't try and kid yourself that you don't. Going into these interviews, the individuals that are interviewing you, they know that you got weaknesses. You can't fool anyone. You're just going to look absolutely ridiculous if you think you have no weaknesses. Now, the key here, though, is to be aware of what your weaknesses are. We're usually all pretty aware of our strengths, and that's great, but you need to be aware of your weaknesses. If they're asking you ways in which you might struggle with something or what your weaknesses are, when you're aware of what your weaknesses are and you can articulate that with the individuals who are interviewing you, that makes you look not only super prepared, but that makes you look like someone who really, really wants to become the best individual that they can possibly become. And these people will take notice of that. But the key is, when you present your weaknesses to these individuals, you have to follow it up with ways in which you know how to rectify or ways in which that you're working on helping yourself get over these weaknesses. So if someone says, hey, what's a weakness of yours? If it was me, I would say something like, I don't like confrontation that much. I don't kind of, enjoy that type of stuff. But I've learned that recently, and I've also been working on ways in which I can improve for getting better at that. And then maybe I could list off some examples, X, Y, Z, different ways for how I'm kind of getting myself to grow out of those weaknesses. So if you don't know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, take some time to learn them. Again, you can just look so far ahead of the curve compared to other individuals, and you can look so professional and so in tune with yourself when you know what these weaknesses are. And of course, when you know what they are, you know how to start fixing them, right? How to, again, address these issues. So that not only serves you for something like an interview, but for everything else in life as well. So really important. Ask yourself what your strengths are, ask yourself what your weaknesses are, and then how you can go about correcting any deficiencies that you feel that you have. So remember, it doesn't look good when you don't know what your weaknesses are. That looks way worse than actually knowing what your weaknesses are and say, hey, I'm well aware of my weaknesses and here's what I'm doing to fix that. Again, if you can do that, you're gonna be way ahead of the curve for other individuals going to these interviews when maybe they're asked about what their own weaknesses are as well. All right, tip number 5. This is my personal favorite tip, so as always, I save the best for last. Tip number 5 is you need to know and understand that the competition that you got going into these interviews is formidable. Meaning these schools are picking the best of the best to go into their PT programs. And you need to be aware of that because you need to show respect for these other individuals when it comes to the interview. If you go in there with this arrogance and you say, hey, I'm so much better because blah, 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 everyone's inferior to me, that's an issue because not only do you look arrogant, but the school is going to say, well, hang on a second, we know how to select good applicants. So what you're telling us is that we don't know how to select good applicants. So what you're doing when you kind of have that attitude is you're just kind of telling the school they don't know what they're doing. And that doesn't really look good. And you need to understand that it's highly likely in this interview that they're going to ask you what makes you different from the other candidates that they're interviewing. Think about it. These schools might be interviewing 100 more, how many individuals they're going to, and they have only so many seats that they can fill up. So they have to do these interviews to really start to, again, know who the best candidates are to bring into their program. So you might find yourself wondering then, well, how do you make yourself stand out when you're acknowledging that the other competition is so great? So here's what I would do. The first thing that I would do is I'd let the people that are interviewing me, I would say, hey, I acknowledge that you guys are selecting the best of the best. And everyone in here is very talented in so many of their own unique ways. And when you acknowledge that for starters, what you're doing is you're saying that, hey, I'm humble and I understand that you guys know what you're doing. But after you have done that, after you have acknowledged that the competition is all really deserving of also earning a seat in the program, then you start to sell yourself. Then you go into the ways in which you've prepared about how you can talk about what makes you different from the other applicants. However you choose to sell yourself, that's going to be up to you. I can't really help you with that. But by starting out and acknowledging that there's some great competition that you're up against, giving them the respect they deserve, and then selling yourself after that, that is a great way to, again, show that you are humble and you respect the competition. You understand that the school is, doing all that they can to select great applicants. But after you do that, you just sell yourself. And again, that's a win-win situation right there. All right, so that's it for today's video. I'm hoping you guys got some great insight out of that. But remember, as I said before, there's way more great tips to know than just the ones I've talked about in this video. And so if you're watching and you're a PT student who has done an interview and gotten in, or again, you've made it all the way through PT school and there's other important tips that you feel pertain to this topic, make sure to leave them in the comment section below because they can be really helpful and beneficial for others who might be trying to get into PT school or might be getting ready for their big interview. So with that all being said, we're going to leave it at that for today's video. Hopefully you guys are all doing well, taking good care of yourselves. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you like this content. I'm going to keep more coming out to you as much as I can. And with that being said, you guys take care. I'll see you in the next video.